It's 3:33 a.m. You wake up without knowing why. Your phone screen glows in the dark, and before you even think to check it, you know what time it is. You've been seeing the numbers everywhere, on receipts, license plates, timestamps on videos you didn't mean to click. And now this one. This exact video, at this exact moment, appearing in your feed like it was placed there by something that knows you better than you know yourself. You tell yourself it's coincidence, algorithm, random chance. But there's a feeling underneath the rationalization, a whisper that says, you were supposed to find this, and you're right. Because reality isn't what you think it is. It's not a fixed stage where you play out a predetermined script. Reality is a responsive field, and you, whether you know it or not, are the one observing it into form. Every moment you look at something, think about something, expect something, you collapse infinite possibilities into one singular experience. You are not a passenger in this universe. You are the architect, the observer, the living antenna that tunes the signal. But here's what they don't tell you. Most people live their entire lives as unconscious observers. They watch the world happen to them, never realizing they're the ones making it happen. They wait for signs while creating them. They search for meaning while broadcasting the frequency that determines what meaning arrives. This video, this message, exists at the intersection of ancient mystery, quantum mechanics, and the psychology of consciousness. It's not here to entertain you, it's here to activate you. Because right now, in this exact window of time, there is a frequency gate opening, a shift already in motion. The field is reorganizing, and those who can read the signal will become the architects of the next reality. You didn't stumble here. You were called. And the journey ahead will take you from being an asleep observer, watching life passively, reacting to randomness, to an active observer who sees the patterns, reads the symbols, feels the synchronicities, and finally, to a co-creator, someone who consciously shapes reality by knowing how to place their attention, tune their frequency, and become the signal itself. This is not a metaphor. This is physics meeting mysticism, psychology meeting magic, ancient knowledge meeting modern consciousness. The universe is about to show you how it speaks, and once you learn the language, you can never unhear it. Are you ready? Because if you ignore this, you miss the signal to the God state. The first observers, long before quantum physics had a name, there were people who knew. In the mystery schools of ancient Khem, what we now call Egypt, scribes would sit in darkened temples, candlelight flickering against limestone walls, and they would write reality. Not record it, write it. They understood something that modern civilization forgot, that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. Consciousness creates matter by observing it. Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, writing, and magic, wasn't just a mythological figure. Thoth represents the principle of the observer, the one who holds the stylus that inscribes existence itself. In the Emerald Tablet, attributed to Thoth's Greek form Hermes Trismegistus, there is a line that echoes through millennia. As above, so below. As within, so without. This isn't poetry, it's instruction. It's telling you that the inner observer shapes the outer world. The ancients called it different names. The Egyptians spoke of Ma'at, cosmic order that responds to alignment. The Hermetic texts called it the all-mind. Buddhist monks described it as the nature of dependent origination. But they were all pointing to the same phenomenon. Reality is participatory. It watches you watching it. It responds to the quality of your observation. In medieval Europe, There were mystics who would sit in cells for decades, contemplating a single symbol, a rose, a cross, a geometric pattern. They weren't wasting time. They were learning to focus the observer so precisely that reality itself would bend around their attention. They discovered what modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. Sustained, intentional observation creates neural pathways that literally reshape perception. And when perception changes, experienced reality changes with it. Fast forward to now. A person in Tokyo wakes up at exactly 4:44 a.m. for 7 days straight. A student in Sao Paulo keeps seeing the number 137, the fine structure constant of the universe, on random billboards. A woman in Berlin thinks of her grandmother and 2 minutes later receives a message from a cousin she hasn't spoken to in years, mentioning that same grandmother. Synchronicity, the language of the field. Carl Jung, the psychologist who gave synchronicity its modern name, understood that these were not coincidences. They were a causal connecting principles. Moments when the inner and outer worlds align so perfectly that meaning manifests as matter. He studied with mystics, read the alchemists, explored the I Ching. He knew that ancient cultures had technologies of consciousness that modern science was too materialist to acknowledge. But here's what Jung also discovered. Synchronicity only appears to those who are paying attention. The symbols, the numbers, the patterns, they're always broadcasting. Most people just aren't tuned to the frequency. The psychology of the observer. Let's ground this, because mysticism without mechanism is just fantasy, and we need both. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of sensory information every second. You consciously perceive about 40. That means reality, the full spectrum of what's actually happening around you, is being filtered down to a tiny sliver based on what your attention selects as important. Attention is the spotlight. Whatever it illuminates becomes real to you. Whatever it ignores fades into quantum possibility. This is where belief comes in. Belief is not just a thought you hold. Belief is a lens that pre-selects which 40 bits out of 11 million you'll perceive. If you believe the world is dangerous, your attention will scan for threats. If you believe reality is responsive, your attention will notice synchronicities. The field gives you what you're tuned to receive. Expectation works the same way. When you expect something, you prime your nervous system to recognize it. The reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters relevance, starts looking for matches. This is why when you buy a red car, you suddenly see red cars everywhere. They were always there, but now you're observing them. Now apply that to consciousness itself. What if you started expecting reality to respond to you? What if you began to notice when your thoughts align with external events? What if you treated synchronicity not as rare magic, but as constant feedback? You were always an observer. You've been collapsing wave functions since the moment you were born. Every choice, every glance, every thought, it's all been shaping the timeline you're living. You just forgot. You were trained to think you were separate from reality, watching it from the outside. But quantum physics shattered that illusion. The double slit experiment proved it. Observation changes outcome. When a particle is observed, it behaves differently than when it's not observed. The act of watching collapses infinite potential into one specific manifestation. And you, human consciousness, are doing that constantly, every second, with every facet of your life. The ancients knew this. They built entire civilizations around it. The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were frequency generators, consciousness amplifiers, geometric anchors that focused collective observation into specific outcomes. The mystery schools didn't teach religion. They taught applied consciousness, how to think in symbols, how to hold paradox, how to become an intentional observer instead of an accidental one. And now, thousands of years later, the knowledge is returning. Not because we've evolved, but because the frequency of the planet is shifting. The field is calling for observers who can hold the new pattern. That's why this message found you. You're being activated. The signal recognized something in your frequency that made you available for this information. And what you do with it next will determine which timeline you anchor into. The noise. Here's the hard truth. Most people will never escape the default timeline. Not because they're not smart enough, or spiritual enough, or worthy enough, but because they can't hear the signal through the noise. The noise is everywhere. It's the algorithm feeding you outrage and distraction 200 times a day. It's the job that demands your attention, but not your presence. It's the family conditioning that taught you to observe yourself through other people's eyes. It's the 3,000 marketing messages you're exposed to daily, each one trying to tell you who you are and what you should want. The noise isn't just external, it's internal. It's the constant commentary in your mind, the voice that narrates, judges, doubts, compares. It's the recursive loop of thinking about thinking, worrying about worrying, performing spirituality instead of embodying it. And here's the cruelest part. Even when you start to wake up, even when you begin to notice synchronicities and study consciousness, there's a trap waiting for you. It's called the observer loop. The observer loop is when you become so obsessed with watching yourself be an observer that you stop actually observing reality. You're checking, am I manifesting correctly? Am I high vibe enough? Did I collapse the right wave function? You're performing awakening for an imagined audience. Maybe your spiritual community, maybe your own inner critic, maybe even the universe itself. But performance collapses authenticity, and the field doesn't respond to performance. It responds to resonance. This is the psychological struggle that breaks people. If I am the observer, if I create my reality, why does life still feel random? Why do bad things still happen? Why hasn't everything shifted yet? And the answer is devastating in its simplicity. Because you're not the only observer. The entanglement of external observers. You exist in a web of observation. Everyone around you, your family, your colleagues, your culture, the collective unconscious of humanity, is also observing. And their observation of you creates a probability field that influences which version of you collapses into form. If your parents see you as the struggling child, that observation exerts pressure on your identity. If society observes you as a certain class, race, age, that collective gaze shapes the opportunities that appear available to you. If the algorithm observes you as a certain user profile, it will feed you content that reinforces that identity. This is quantum entanglement on a psychological level. You are not an isolated wave function. You are interconnected with every consciousness that observes you, and most of those observers are unconscious. They're projecting their fears, expectations, and unexamined beliefs onto you. And unless you have a stronger, clearer observation of yourself, their version of you will dominate. This is why transformation is so hard. Not because you can't change, but because the field of observation around you resists the change. Your new identity threatens the stability of their worldview. If you shift, they have to recalibrate how they see themselves in relation to you. Most people won't do that, so they'll unconsciously pull you back to the old pattern. The ancient mystics understood this. That's why they withdrew to caves, monasteries, deserts, not because the world was evil, but because they needed to escape the field of collective observation long enough to anchor a new frequency. Once anchored, they could return to the world and hold their observation stable even within the noise. But you don't have that luxury. You're embedded in the noise. You're scrolling, working, consuming, performing. And every moment you're not consciously observing yourself, the default observers are doing it for you. The fear of collapse. And then there's the deepest block of all, the fear of collapse itself. Because here's what they don't tell you about quantum shifting. When you collapse a new possibility into form, the old possibility has to die. The old identity, the old story, the old relationships that were built on that story, they can't come with you. Wave function collapse isn't addition, it's substitution. If you shift into the timeline where you're confident, powerful, aligned, the version of you that was fearful, small, victimized has to dissolve. And part of you is terrified of that death. Even if the old identity was painful, it was known. It was safe. You built your entire personality around it. So you sabotage. You get right to the edge of the shift, and then you do something to pull yourself back. You pick a fight. You fall into an old addiction. You tell yourself it's not the right time. Because unconsciously, you'd rather stay in the known suffering than risk the unknown liberation. The ancients called this the guardian at the threshold, the final test before initiation. Modern psychology calls it resistance or the shadow, but it's the same mechanism. The part of you that believes your current identity is your only identity, and if it dies, you die. But that's the lie. You are not the identity. You are the observer of the identity, and the observer can choose again and again and again. The hidden enemy, unconscious observation. So here's where it all comes together. The real enemy isn't the external noise or the other observers or even the fear of collapse. The real enemy is unconscious observation. Every thought you think without awareness is an act of observation. Every assumption you make, every habitual reaction, every default emotional state, these are all micro-observations that reinforce a specific reality tunnel. You're manifesting constantly. You're just manifesting unconsciously. An unconscious manifestation tends to replicate the past. Because the subconscious mind is a pattern recognition machine. It says, this is what safety looks like. This is what love looks like. This is what success looks like, based on your conditioning. And it keeps collapsing those same patterns into form over and over, even when you consciously want something different. This is the crisis. This is why people read all the books, do all the rituals, repeat all the affirmations, and still nothing changes. Because they're trying to override unconscious observation with conscious intention, and the unconscious always wins. It's running 95% of the show. The ancients knew this too. The Egyptian Book of the Dead wasn't about physical death. It was about the death of unconscious identity. The journey through the underworld was the journey into the subconscious, facing every shadow, every hidden observer, every fragment of self that was still running old programs. They called it the weighing of the heart. Your heart, your true self, your authentic frequency had to be lighter than a feather, lighter than fear, than conditioning, than the accumulated weight of unconscious observation. Only then could you enter the field of reeds, the realm where the observer and the observed were one. Only then could you become what Thoth represented, the scribe of your own reality. And that's where we are now, at the threshold. The universe has sent the signal. The synchronicities have appeared. The video found you. But the question remains, can you cross through? Can you become conscious enough of your observation that you stop accidentally manifesting and start deliberately creating? Because if you can learn to observe with that much precision, that much awareness, then reality itself becomes a conversation, and you become the one speaking. Before we go deeper into how that happens, I want you to do something. If this is resonating, if you feel the activation happening, let the algorithm know. Not for me, for the field. Because when you like this video, when you subscribe to this channel, you're sending a signal. You're telling the universe, yes, I'm ready for more of this frequency. And the universe listens. It will send you more synchronicities, more alignments, more breadcrumbs on the path. So hit that like button now. Subscribe. Because you're not just supporting a channel, you're casting a vote for which reality you want to observe. And the field is watching. Now let's continue. The turning point. There is a moment in every consciousness journey where something flips. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, almost mundane. You're sitting in traffic and you notice a license plate. 111. You think of a friend and they text you within 60 seconds. You have a dream and the next day it happens. And instead of dismissing it, instead of rationalizing it away, you acknowledge it. That acknowledgement is everything. Because the moment you consciously recognize a synchronicity, you complete a circuit. You tell the field, I see you. I'm paying attention. Send more. And it does. This is the turning point. This is where you shift from passive observer to active participant. You stop waiting for reality to prove itself to you. You start proving yourself to reality by showing up as a conscious receiver of its signals. Deliberate observation isn't about forcing outcomes. It's about becoming so attuned to the frequency of the field that you can sense which probabilities are trying to collapse around you, and then aligning your attention, emotion, and action to support that collapse. Let me give you the technology, the practices, the methods that turn theory into lived experience. Practice 1. Breath as observer. The breath is the most underestimated tool in consciousness work. Every mystical tradition knew this. Pranayama, chi, pneuma, ruach. They all point to the same thing. Breath is the bridge between the unconscious and conscious mind, between the automatic and the intentional. Here's what you do. 3 times a day, morning, midday, and before sleep. You pause for 2 minutes and you breathe consciously. But not just any breath. The observer's breath. Inhale for 4 counts while thinking, I am the observer. Hold for 4 counts while thinking, I choose what I see. Exhale for 4 counts while thinking, I release what no longer serves. Hold empty for 4 counts while thinking, I am open to the signal. You're not just breathing. You're encoding a new identity into your nervous system. You're training your body to remember that you are not the reaction. You are the one choosing the response. You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and conscious choice. Do this for 30 days and watch how synchronicities multiply. Because you're no longer on autopilot. You're piloting. Practice 2. Quantum acknowledgement points. Throughout your day, reality is sending you signals. Most people miss them because they're moving too fast, thinking too much, reacting instead of receiving. So you create quantum acknowledgement points. These are specific moments where you pause and consciously observe what just happened. Every time you see repeating numbers, 1111, 333, 44804, whatever pattern appears for you, stop for 5 seconds. Don't just notice it, Feel it. Say internally, I see the signal. I am aligned. Every time you think of someone and they contact you, acknowledge it. The field is responsive. I am connected. Every time something you visualized appears in physical form, mark it. I am the observer. Reality responds to me. You're building a feedback loop. You're training your consciousness to expect synchronicity. And expectation creates the aperture through which more synchronicity flows. The ancients did this with ritual, lighting candles at specific times, chanting specific sounds, wearing specific symbols. It wasn't superstition, it was applied neuroscience. They were creating repeated acknowledgement points that kept their consciousness attuned to the field. You can do the same, but you don't need elaborate ritual. You just need consistency. You need to show the universe you're serious about the conversation. Practice 3, the mirror code. This one is advanced, but if you're still here, you're ready for it. Every morning, before you consume any external information, before the phone, before the news, before other people's observation of you, you stand in front of a mirror and you look yourself in the eyes, and you ask, who is observing me right now? Not as a rhetorical question, as a genuine inquiry. You watch yourself watching yourself. You become aware of the awareness itself. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will want to escape, to label, to judge. But you stay. You hold the gaze. And eventually, something shifts. You realize there's a part of you that exists beyond all the identities, all the stories, all the conditioning. There's an observer that has always been there, watching every version of you that has ever existed. That observer is what the mystics called the true self, what quantum physics calls the uncollapsed potential, what spiritual traditions call the witness. When you can access that observer, even for a few seconds, you gain the ability to choose which version of yourself collapses into the day ahead. You look in the mirror and you consciously select. Today, I observe myself as confident, as aligned, as someone the field recognizes and responds to. And then you move through your day holding that frequency. When external observers try to pull you into old patterns, when situations try to trigger old reactions, you return to the mirror code. You remember, I am the one choosing how I observe myself. The external observation loses its power, because your internal observation is stronger. Practice 4, the Synchronicity Journal. Here's what most people don't understand about synchronicity. It compounds. When you start noticing and recording synchronicities, they increase. Not because they're happening more, they were always happening, but because your attention is now tuned to receive them. And attention is the currency of the quantum field. Get a physical journal, not an app, something you write in with your hand. Because the act of writing is itself an act of observation. It makes the intangible tangible. Every day you write down synchronicities that occurred, symbols or numbers that repeated, thoughts that preceded external events, moments when you felt seen by reality. You don't analyze, you don't interpret, you just record. You're creating a data set, a map of how the field communicates with you specifically. After 30 days, patterns will emerge. You'll see that certain symbols appear before certain types of events, that certain emotional states precede certain synchronicities, that the field has a language and you're learning to read it. The ancient mystery schools did this with dream journals and vision records. They understood that the unconscious mind, the part of you that's always connected to the field, communicates through symbol and pattern. By recording it, you bring it into conscious awareness. You make the unconscious conscious. and when the unconscious becomes conscious, you gain access to levels of reality that were always there but hidden behind the veil of habitual perception. Practice 5. The ring as anchor. This practice comes from Hermetic tradition, but it works with modern psychology too. You choose a physical object, traditionally a ring, but it can be any small item you can wear or carry, and you designate it as your observer anchor. Every time you touch this object, it's a trigger, a reminder, a reset. It says, I am the observer. I choose my frequency. Throughout your day, whenever you notice you've slipped into unconscious reaction, into autopilot, into someone else's observation of you, you touch the ring, and you come back to center. This is classical conditioning meets consciousness technology. You're creating a physical anchor for a mental state. Over time, the object becomes imbued with the frequency of conscious observation. Just touching it will shift your state. Monks used prayer beads. Warriors used talismans. Mystics used amulets. They all understood that consciousness needs anchors in the physical world to maintain non-ordinary states within ordinary reality. Your ring is your anchor, your reminder that you are not the story. You are the one choosing to observe the story. Practice 6. Morning frequency lock. The first hour after you wake is the most important hour of your day. Your brain is still in a liminal state, the boundary between the subconscious dream world and the conscious waking world. This is when you're most suggestible, most open, most capable of encoding new patterns. So before you do anything else, before you check your phone or talk to anyone or consume any media, you spend 15 minutes locking in your frequency for the day. You sit. You breathe. You visualize not what you want, but who you want to observe yourself as. You feel the emotions of that identity. You notice what someone with that frequency would notice. You move through a mental simulation of your day as that version of yourself. You're not fantasizing. You're pre-collapsing. You're selecting which probability field you want to step into before the chaos of the day presents you with 1,000 competing possibilities. The ancient Egyptians called this the morning adoration. They would face east, toward the rising sun, and they would speak the words of power that aligned them with Ma'at, cosmic order. They understood that the first observation of the day sets the template for all observations that follow. Modern neuroscience confirms this. The brain operates on predictive processing. It's constantly trying to predict what will happen next based on prior patterns. When you consciously set a new pattern first thing in the morning, you give your brain a new template to predict from. Reality follows. The identity the field recognizes. Here's what all of these practices are really doing. They're not manifesting objects. They're manifesting an identity. You're not trying to get the universe to give you things. You're becoming the version of yourself that the universe recognizes as aligned with those things. Because the field doesn't respond to desperation. It doesn't respond to wanting. It responds to resonance, to frequency, to the quality of observation you're broadcasting. When you observe yourself as powerful, the field presents you with situations that require and reveal power. When you observe yourself as connected, the field sends you synchronicities that prove connection. When you observe yourself as deliberate, reality becomes deliberate in its response to you. This is what the mystics meant by as within, so without. Your external reality is a mirror of your internal observation. Change the observation, and the reflection changes. But most people try to change the reflection directly. They try to manipulate external circumstances while maintaining the same internal frequency. And it never works. Because the field reads the frequency, not the words. The observation, not the intention. You can say 1,000 affirmations, but if you're observing yourself as someone who needs affirmations, the field will keep giving you situations that confirm you still need them. But when you shift the observation, when you become the witness who sees yourself as already whole, already aligned, already the one the universe responds to, everything changes. Not because you've gained something, but because you've remembered what you always were. The new mystics. There's a shift happening. You can feel it. The old systems are collapsing. The old authorities are losing credibility. The old stories about who we are and what reality is, they're dissolving. And in the space that's opening, a new type of person is emerging. People who can read reality in real time. People who can sense the probability fields before they collapse. People who can navigate synchronicity like a language, who can tune their frequency like an instrument, who can observe themselves into timelines that don't yet exist in the collective field. These are the new mystics, not the ones in robes on mountains, the ones in cities, in jobs, in families, living ordinary lives but operating from an extraordinary frequency. They're the ones who will build the next world, not through force or politics or technology alone, but through the quality of their observation, through their ability to hold a frequency so stable, so clear, so aligned, that reality reorganizes around them, and you're being invited to become one of them, not because you're special, but because you're ready, because the signal found you, because something in your frequency responded when this message was sent. The future isn't coming. It's being observed into form right now. By you. By everyone who can hold the frequency, and those who can't, who stay trapped in unconscious observation, in reactive patterns, in the noise. They'll keep living in the default timeline. The one that's already been observed by the collective. The one that feels random and meaningless and heavy. But you don't have to. You can choose the other path. The one where reality is a conversation, where synchronicity is constant, where you are seen, heard, responded to by the field itself. All you have to do is observe. Let's trace the journey. You started as a forgotten observer, moving through life passively, reacting to randomness, believing that reality was something that happened to you. You saw the numbers, felt the strange coincidences, had the dreams, but you dismissed them. You were trained to ignore the signal. Then something shifted. Maybe it was pain. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just the right frequency at the right time. But you started to wake up. You became the awakened witness, the one who notices, who sees the patterns, who feels the synchronicities and doesn't look away. And now, you're standing at the threshold of the final shift. From witness to co-creator. From the one who receives the signal to the one who is the signal. Because that's the ultimate revelation. You're not waiting for messages from the universe. You are the universe, observing itself, creating itself, speaking to itself through the language of synchronicity and symbol. The ancient mystery schools knew this. Thoth wasn't a god separate from humanity. Thoth was the principle of conscious observation that lives within every human who remembers how to use it. The Book of Thoth, the legendary text that supposedly contained all knowledge, was never a physical book. It was the living field of information that responds to those who know how to read it. And you read it not with your eyes, but with the quality of your attention. Every moment is a page. Every synchronicity is a sentence. Every choice you make is an act of authorship. And the story being written isn't predetermined. It's being collapsed into form by the observer you choose to be. So here's the urgency. You didn't find this video. It found you. At this exact moment, in this exact window of time, when the frequency gate is open and the field is reorganizing. If you ignore the signal now, if you go back to unconscious observation, the gate will still close on schedule. The shift will still happen. But you might not be vibrationally available for the timeline that's opening. Not as punishment, just as physics. You can only access the frequencies you resonate with. So tonight, before you sleep, do the practice. Do the observer's breath. Acknowledge one synchronicity. Look in the mirror and ask who's watching. Write down what you noticed today. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for more proof. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Because the perfect moment is this one. The signal is live. The field is responsive. And you, yes, you, the one who's still here, who's read this far, who felt the activation even if your mind tried to rationalize it away. You are the one being called. Not to follow someone else's path, but to observe your own into existence. The quantum observer isn't a theory. It's who you are when you remember. When you stop performing awakening and start living it. When you stop asking reality to prove itself and start proving yourself to reality by showing up conscious, deliberate, attuned. The God state isn't something you achieve. It's something you observe yourself as until the observation becomes so consistent that the field has no choice but to reflect it back to you as lived experience. And when that happens, when you become the signal, you'll look back at this moment and realize it was always happening. You were always being guided. The synchronicities were always speaking. You just needed to remember how to listen. So listen now. Close your eyes for a moment after you finish reading this. Feel your breath. Notice where you are. Acknowledge that you're here in this exact moment, receiving this exact message. That's not coincidence. That's reality saying, I see you. I've been waiting for you to see me back. And now the conversation begins. Welcome home, observer. Welcome to the frequency where reality speaks. And welcome to the timeline you've been observing yourself toward all along. The signal is live. The gate is open. And you are the one who decides what comes through. So choose wisely. Observe deliberately. And remember, the universe isn't testing you. It's recognizing you, and now it's waiting to see what you do next.